It happens with a softness that catches you off guard. Someone who has spent weeks pulling back, going quiet, showing you in 100 small ways that romance isn't what they want anymore, suddenly says something that sounds thoughtful and warm. They want to stay friends. They tell you how much they care, how important you are to them, how they can't imagine cutting you out completely. It gets framed as the grown-up choice, a way to honor what you had while admitting the romantic part just isn't working. On the surface, it even sounds generous. They aren't vanishing. They aren't ghosting you without a word. They're offering a version of connection that feels manageable to them. But underneath that reasonable-sounding gesture sits a tangle of avoidance that has almost nothing to do with real friendship and almost everything to do with someone who cannot face what they actually feel. That offer of friendship is rarely the plain, honest thing it presents itself as. It isn't proof that their feelings were shallow all along. More often, it's a quiet, desperate move to hold on to you while shielding themselves from the vulnerability that admitting real feelings would demand. Paradoxically, people with avoidant patterns often propose friendship precisely because they love you, not because they don't. The intensity of what they feel scares them so much that they need a smaller, safer box to put it in, and friendship becomes that box. Once you understand why someone reaches for this offer, what's really going on underneath it, and what saying yes would cost you, it becomes clear that this isn't kindness. It's a last move to keep you close, without ever having to show up the way a real partnership would require. Friendship feels safer to them than owning up to romantic vulnerability. For someone wired to avoid dependence, romantic love is about as threatening as it gets. Loving someone means handing them the power to hurt you, needing them in ways you can't fully control, tying your happiness to theirs whether you like it or not. For a person whose whole psychological setup revolves around never being that exposed, falling for someone doesn't feel like joy. It feels like danger. Their nervous system reads deep feelings as a threat, not a gift. They notice they think about you all the time, that your mood shifts depending on whether you're around, and instead of feeling good about it, alarm bells go off. That reaction traces back further than you or this relationship. Somewhere along the way, they learned that caring about someone gives that person leverage to hurt or abandon them, so they built an entire defense system to make sure they'd never be that exposed again. And now, against their own rules, they're feeling exactly what they swore off. They can't just relax into it and let the relationship deepen. That would take a kind of openness they don't have access to. They can't say, "I love you" out loud, because saying it would make it undeniably real. They can't commit, because commitment would lock in a dependence they're terrified of. But they also can't walk away entirely, because some part of them genuinely doesn't want to lose you. Friendship becomes their way out of that bind. It lets them keep you around without admitting how deep their feelings actually run, because in their mind, friendship simply requires less exposure than romance does. Friends care about each other, sure, but they don't lean on each other the same way. There's more room, more independence, less full-body vulnerability. That lighter form of closeness is exactly what makes it feel survivable to them. By calling it friendship, they get to downgrade the emotional stakes in their own head. They're not confessing to being in love, which would mean confronting real vulnerability. They're simply saying they value you as a friend, something far easier to say out loud and far easier to live with. This reframing does double duty for their ego too. Many avoidant people have built an identity around being self-sufficient, the person who doesn't need anyone, who's fine on their own. Admitting they've fallen for someone cracks that story wide open, but calling the connection a friendship lets them sidestep that crack entirely. They get to keep caring about you while still insisting, to themselves and to you, that they don't need romantic partnership, that this is simply a values-based choice rather than an escape from feelings too big to handle. They genuinely convince themselves that friendship will feel lighter, easier, less charged, simply because the label changed and the pressure of romantic expectations disappeared with it. What they miss is that feelings don't reorganize themselves just because you rename the relationship. Loving someone doesn't shrink because you start calling them a friend instead of a partner. The vulnerability that scares them doesn't evaporate just because the status changed on paper. This is where their whole theory falls apart. They think vulnerability comes from labels and structures, when really it comes from caring from someone's presence or absence actually affecting you. Nothing about that changes when you swap partner for friend. If they actually follow through on this friendship, they'll eventually discover they feel just as exposed, just as invested, just as rattled by you, because the underlying feelings never moved. But at the moment they offer it, they haven't figured that out yet. To them, it feels like a genuine solution, not more avoidance in a different outfit. There's another layer to this offer that's worth naming plainly. It lets them keep enjoying what you bring to their life without meeting any of the responsibilities that came with dating you. During the relationship, your completely normal needs, wanting regular contact, wanting emotional presence, wanting them to follow through on their word, likely felt to them like pressure, like demands, like a trap closing in. And yet, despite all that discomfort, they were still getting something real out of having you around. Emotional support, companionship, a version of themselves that felt more alive, even if they couldn't fully receive or admit any of it. They don't want to lose those benefits. They just don't want the obligations that came attached to them. Friendship, in their mind, seems to offer the best of both worlds, all the perks, none of the price tag. They can still text you, still see you, still soak up whatever good feeling your presence brings, but without owing you the things a partner owes a partner. No daily check-ins required, no emotional exposure expected. Long gaps without contact become totally fine, because that's just how friends operate. This wish list says everything about whose comfort actually matters here. They aren't thinking about what's good for you, whether this arrangement might hurt you, stall your healing, or keep you hoping for something that will never come. Their focus stays fixed entirely on their own ease, which is exactly the kind of self-centeredness avoidant patterns tend to produce. Offering friendship also spares them the guilt of a clean break. Most people with avoidant tendencies aren't trying to be cruel. They know walking away entirely would hurt you, and they don't actually want that. But they also know they can't keep the romantic relationship going, given their limits. Friendship becomes a compromise that lets their conscience off the hook. They get to tell themselves they're being considerate by not disappearing completely, that keeping the connection alive in some form is the kind thing to do. This matters to them because it protects the story they tell about themselves as someone decent, not someone who uses people and tosses them aside. The offer becomes evidence, in their eyes, of good intentions, conveniently ignoring who the arrangement actually serves. There's often an unspoken motive running underneath all of this too, keeping you within reach in case they change down the line. It's rarely something they'd admit or even fully recognize in themselves, but some part of them suspects that once their anxiety settles, once they feel less defended, they might actually want a relationship with you after all. Friendship keeps that door propped open. It keeps you close, keeps the connection alive, and keeps you from fully moving on and becoming unavailable to them. It's a kind of insurance policy against the fear that they'll eventually heal enough to want what they're currently unable to offer, only to discover you've already moved on with someone else. That insurance policy function is one of the more quietly damaging parts of this whole setup, because it keeps you frozen in place while they take all the time they want to sort themselves out. You stay emotionally tied in, hoping the friendship might eventually shift back into something more, waiting for some future version of them to show up ready. Meanwhile, they're free to date other people, free to do their inner work at their own pace, free to live without factoring your timeline into anything. The arrangement quietly benefits them enormously, while it costs you the chance to fully let go and open yourself up to something real with someone else. The idea that friendship will somehow be pressure-free is mostly a fantasy, even if they don't realize it. They imagine that without the romantic label, none of the old expectations will apply. But if you actually accept this offer, your needs don't just disappear. You'll likely still want more contact than they're comfortable giving, still hope for a level of emotional honesty they can't provide, still expect the follow-through they never quite delivered before. All the same friction that made the romance hard will resurface in the friendship, except now you'll have even less room to say anything about it, because "we're just friends" becomes their built-in excuse for staying unavailable. What they're describing when they ask for connection without vulnerability, closeness without consistency, your presence without any obligation on their part, isn't friendship at all. It's continued avoidance wearing a new name. Real friendship runs on mutual care, on both people showing up, on reasonable expectations for reliability. What's actually being offered here is access to you entirely on their terms, with nothing required of them in return. That's not friendship. That's a one-sided arrangement, dressed up to look like compromise. There's also a quieter agenda at play, staying in control. Throughout the romantic relationship, real intimacy would have meant surrendering some control, letting someone else's needs shape your choices, accepting that you can't manage every emotional variable. For someone defended against exactly that kind of exposure, losing control like that feels unbearable. Proposing friendship instead of romance hands that control right back to them. Suddenly, they're the ones setting the terms, deciding the relationship is over, drawing the new boundaries for how things will work going forward. Being back in the driver's seat feels far safer than the messy, negotiated uncertainty that real partnership requires. This same offer also lets them shape the story of why things ended. If they can frame the breakup as a mutual, mature realization that you're simply better suited as friends, they never have to own up to the fact that their avoidance is what broke things. It becomes a tidy narrative where both people gently agreed friendship suits you better, instead of the harder truth that they couldn't tolerate the vulnerability that real romance demanded. That narrative protects their self-image while quietly burying their part in why the relationship failed in the first place. The friendship offer also functions, whether they'd admit it or not, as a test. They want to see whether you'll accept them on their terms, whether you'll stick around even without getting what you actually need, whether your willingness to settle proves how much you care. Your response tells them exactly how much leverage they hold, how invested you still are, how far you're willing to bend your own needs just to stay connected. If you say yes to the friendship, it confirms to them that they're worth staying for, even while withholding real partnership, a message that feels good to receive and costs them nothing to earn. This test, though, is rigged from the start. If you accept the friendship, you're the one giving up your own needs to hand them validation they haven't done anything to deserve. If you decline, they might tell themselves that proves you never really loved them, that your affection was conditional, that people only stick around when they're getting something out of it. Either way you respond, it ends up reinforcing whatever defended worldview they already had, rather than pushing them to grow past it. There's no version of your response that actually challenges the pattern. Control shows up again in how the friendship lets them dictate distance. During the romance, your reasonable desire for closeness kept bumping into their need for space, and that friction was constant. But under the umbrella of friendship, they get to set exactly the distance that feels comfortable to them and call it appropriate, rather than admitting it's just their same avoidance again. If you want more contact, they can say you're expecting too much from a friendship. If you need more emotional openness, they can say that's simply not what friendship involves. The framework becomes a built-in excuse to maintain distance while making your desire for something more sound unreasonable. This setup conveniently shifts blame onto you if you ever push back. If you say the friendship isn't enough, that you're struggling with the downgrade, they can spin it as you not respecting the boundaries they've set, as you wanting more than they've clearly said they can give, as you being unable to accept the relationship for what it is. That framing protects them from ever having to sit with the pain their limitations cause, while quietly making you the one with the problem. Staying loosely connected through friendship also lets them avoid the full emotional weight of what they'd be giving up. As long as some connection remains, they can tell themselves nothing important has really been lost, that you're still part of each other's lives, that the relationship simply changed shape instead of ending. A full, clean ending would force them to sit with the loss and maybe even face their own role in causing it. Ongoing friendship lets them dodge that entirely, preserving the comfortable fiction that everything essential is still intact. Maybe the most damaging piece of all is the quiet, often unspoken hope that you'll simply wait for them while they figure themselves out. Somewhere inside, they may sense that they're not ready to be the partner you deserve, that their patterns are doing real damage, that something in them needs to change before they could ever show up the way you need. But they're not prepared to do that work yet. It might take a long time, and they know it. The friendship keeps you nearby in the meantime, so that if they ever do get there, you might still be available. It's rarely said outright, but it operates powerfully underneath the whole arrangement. In effect, they're asking you to stay emotionally invested while they take however long they need to figure out whether they're even capable of meeting you halfway. That's a deeply lopsided ask. It puts your romantic life on hold indefinitely while they carry on with theirs, doing their inner work without any pressure, dating other people if they feel like it, living entirely on their own schedule while you wait in the background. There's no equivalent sacrifice on their end. You're the one absorbing the cost of an arrangement built entirely around their comfort and their timeline. Often, this waiting game gets dressed up as respect for your independence. They'll say things like, "I want you to live your life," or "I'm not asking you to wait for me." It sounds generous, but it works more like a built-in excuse they get to say they never explicitly asked you to wait, even while maintaining a connection clearly designed to keep you in orbit. They get all the benefit of your continued availability without ever having to take responsibility for asking for it. And that dynamic quietly poisons any chance of the friendship becoming something genuine, because real friendship isn't secretly waiting to turn into something else. It's complete on its own terms, without a hidden agenda running underneath it. That lingering hope also says something true. Even if the delivery is unfair, it shows they know you're valuable, that losing you completely would be a real loss, that what you offer isn't easy to find elsewhere. That's part of why they can't fully release you, why they need this looser connection to stay in place. But wanting you to wait around for a future version of them that may never arrive asks you to put your very real, present needs on hold for a possibility that might never pay off. They might never do the work. They might do the work but not want it with you by the time they're done. They might take so long that you've already built something real with someone else. Every one of those outcomes is more likely than the version where you wait, they heal, and it all works out. And finally, keeping this connection alive protects them from something that might actually push them to change. When people avoid full loss when they never have to feel the complete absence of someone who mattered, they rarely feel the kind of gut-level reckoning that pushes real growth. It's often only in fully losing someone, without the cushion of an ongoing friendship, that avoidant patterns get examined at all. As long as the friendship persists, that full loss never happens, and neither, usually, does the change that loss might have sparked. And finally, keeping this connection alive protects them from something that might actually push them to change. When people avoid full loss when they never have to feel the complete absence of someone who mattered, they rarely feel the kind of gut-level reckoning that pushes real growth. It's often only in fully losing someone, without the cushion of an ongoing friendship, that avoidant patterns get examined at all. As long as the friendship persists, that full loss never happens, and neither, usually, does the change that loss might have sparked. When you put all of this together, the picture that emerges isn't one of kindness or maturity, it's one of self-protection, dressed up in generous language. Every piece of the friendship offer, from the guilt management to the insurance policy to the quiet hope that you'll wait, points back to the same center of gravity. Their comfort, their timeline, their fear of exposure. None of it was built around what you need to heal, or what would actually be fair to you. That doesn't necessarily make them a villain. Most people who behave this way aren't acting out of cruelty, they're acting out of a nervous system that has spent years equating closeness with danger. But understanding their fear doesn't obligate you to organize your life around it. You're allowed to recognize the pattern for what it is, without needing them to recognize it too. Accepting the friendship rarely delivers what it promises. It doesn't give you peace, because peace requires closure, and this arrangement is specifically designed to avoid closure. It doesn't give you the relationship you actually wanted, because the same limitations that ended the romance are still fully intact underneath the new label. What it gives you, instead, is a slower, more drawn-out version of the same disappointment, a front-row seat to their unavailability, indefinitely extended, with your own hope quietly doing the work of keeping you there. The version of them you're hoping will eventually show up may exist somewhere down the road, or it may not exist at all. Either way, waiting for it costs you real time, real energy, and real chances at something mutual, right now, with someone actually capable of meeting you. The healthiest response, even though it's rarely the easiest one, is usually to decline the offer entirely, not out of spite, and not to punish them, but because you owe yourself an actual ending, rather than a slow fade dressed up as friendship. A clean break doesn't just protect you from the frustrating half-life of an unequal, undefined connection. It also removes the cushion that's letting them avoid the full weight of what their patterns cost. Walking away doesn't guarantee they'll change. It might not, but it does guarantee that you stop financing their process with your own present and future. Grieving a full loss hurts more sharply at first than easing into a vague, ongoing friendship, but it resolves. It has an end point. The friendship, by design, does not. In the end, the friendship offer asks you to shrink your needs down to the size of what someone else is able to give, rather than asking them to grow into what a real relationship with you would require. Choosing yourself, instead choosing distance, choosing grief that actually moves through you, choosing the discomfort of a real ending over the comfort of a fake continuation isn't cold or unloving. It's the only path that actually leads somewhere. It opens space for someone who can meet you without conditions, without a holding pattern, without asking you to wait indefinitely for a version of them that may never arrive. You don't owe anyone your patience while they decide if they're capable of loving you properly. You're allowed to want more than crumbs, and you're allowed to walk toward whoever is actually ready to give you the whole thing.